Hello everybody, welcome back to the Brothers Grim Dark, where today I'm going to be talking to you about my Iyanden GT list that we'll be running in this season's Challenger series. So I've had some games with this. I took it to the Gibraltar SM Battle Reports GT and mixed bag. So the list kind of, in one respect, performed exactly how I wanted it to do. It's very tough and it's very killy and it scores its secondaries very well. However, most of the games I played, I just found I was getting drowned out on the primary turns 1, 2, and 3, and I didn't really start scoring until turns 4 and 5, which is a problem. But I'm not going to tweak the list for the GT series we've got here. I'm just going to see if I can find a way to make this work, because it's very fun to play, it's very thematic, and yeah, it just makes me feel good in my little soul here. It makes me feel good. So, just to begin with, what we've got a Farseer, because why not, who's got Guide and Fortune. So this is one of the things I would maybe change a little bit if I was going to, because there's no OBSEC in this list, but I could change the Fortune, which I didn't find I needed that much because the list is already very, very tough, to Will of Asuryani, which would allow me to give OBSEC to something. So that's maybe a tweak I could make, but I'm not going to do that just now. So he's got that, and then he's the Warlord, but no Warlord trait. And then I'm running a Spiritseer with Protect and Jinx and the Psytronome of Iyanden. So gives me a nice little sort of lieutenant reroll 1s to wound aura with that, and Protect and Jinx, obviously very good psychic power, and the Psytronome of Iyanden lets me give a unit +1 to their attacks characteristic. So that's going to be very obvious which unit that is going to go on in a moment. In my elites, I have 2 units of 5 Wraithguard with the D size. They're just the big damage outputs of this list, really. They can go after anything. They're D6 shots each. I can stick Guide on them so they can advance and still shoot with pretty good effect. And yeah, with strength 10, AP -4, damage 1, but 6s do mortal wounds that doesn't cap. That's very, very powerful. It can go after anything. It can go after infantry, it can go after knights. It's just a very good, you never feel like you're wasting a round of shooting because it can target anything quite happily. So I've got 2 units of those. They're expensive, but they're very good at what they do. And then I have a big blob of 10 Wraithblades with the ARKS and shield. So they're going to be having this +1 attack stuck on them basically every turn, because it just makes them actually quite good in combat, because they're very, very tough, but they're not that killy base, but just buffing them up from 3 attacks base to 4 attacks really makes them quite good in combat. Again, in elites, I've got 2 identical Wraithlords with 2 Bright Lances and Shuriken. No points for the swords, bit of a shame, but that's where we are. And then lastly, yeah, it's a very short and small army this. I've got in the heavy support, I have 2 Wraithseers, identical weapons loadout. They both got the D cannon, but in terms of psychic powers, one of them has Enhance and Drain, so that can give me +1 to hit, or it can give my opponent +1 to hit in combat. And the other one has Embolden and Horrify, which is either +2 to leadership and what else does Embolden and Horrify do? +2 to leadership and that's it. And Fight first, or it's -2 to leadership and fight last. So that's got some utility in play that I can do around that. And that's it, that's the list. In terms of stratagems, as I say, for me and Rowan's GT Challenger series, we've capped ourselves at 5 stratagems each. So I've got, I'll just read through them. I have Multifaceted Mind, so that lets my Farseer be able to do a psychic action and a psychic power at the same time, so that's quite good. We'll get to my secondaries that I'll most likely be running in a moment, and that'll sort of explain why I'm taking that. Got Feigned Retreat. Even though the Wraithguard can shoot into combat, that's still very handy to have on things like my Wraithseers, because their D cannons can't shoot into combat, so being able to fall back, shoot something else and charge something else is still very, very powerful on those. I've got Webway Strike. So this is this sort of janky thing I'm trying to do with this army, because it's very slow, it's very tough, but it's very slow. So I can spend 3 CP or 1 CP, depending on what I want to do, to put 1 or 2 units in the webway so I can deep strike with them in from turn 2 onwards. So that's obviously always going to go on the Wraithguard with their D-sides. They can drop in and just basically annihilate what they want to annihilate. It does mean I've got even less troops, even less models on the board to begin with, but it's very killy and it's a very powerful asset to have. As I say, I've not quite figured out how to get this army to score as high as I wanted to early on in game, but it is very, very killy. Light and fast reactions, you can't really take Eldar or Drukhari without it. It's very, very powerful. Guided Wraith Sight, that basically lets me do that. The Spiritseer's reroll once the wound aura, it lets me just stick that on a unit anywhere on the battlefield. So that's quite nice. If I deep strike in with my Wraithguard, I can have them reroll their once the wound. And that's it. Those are my 5 stratagems. Yeah, I think mostly useful, though some of them might not come up every game, but there'll be games where one of them will come up and it'll become really clutch to have that in the tool set, essentially. Secondaries I'm going to be running most of the time is pretty much always grind, because this army is so small and so elite and so tough. If I'm not out killing my opponent, I'm probably losing the game, right? Like it's one of those ones that I want to be doing. You should always pick secondaries that your army kind of wants to be doing anyway. I'm always going to pick the Elder specific one, Scry Futures, because I've got 4 Psychers on the board, so I can hopefully get onto those objectives early with the Wraithseers, do the ones that are in no man's land, and then the army can fold back and do the one in my deployment zone later. Or depending on the matchup, maybe if I want to just spread out across the board, I can do that one first and slowly march forward. So, bit of play there. Again, I've got multifaceted mind, so my Farseer can still put guide on something and do that psychic action. And lastly, depends on matchup. So sometimes I might want to take behind enemy lines, because I can deep strike those 2 Wraithguard units in and try shift them. Like, yes, they've not got an invuln save, but your opponent will have to stick a fair bit of firepower or combat into them to get them removed. So I think that's a good play there, just because it's a tough 3 wounds, toughness 6, reduced damage unit to have in your opponent's deployment zone to try either screen out or deal with if they get there. So that's probably the play with those. And yeah, sometimes Assassinate might be useful. It depends on the matchup. Really, Grind and Scry are the 2 go-to, and the other one is sort of matchup dependent. But that's the list. It's a very simple list. It's very small. It's sort of very thematic. Yes, it has gaps because it just doesn't score on the primary as well as it could, but I'm determined to try and make this list work before 10th edition comes out. So I'll probably only have 1 or 2 games of this on the channel, and then me and Rowan will be tweaking our Tyranids and Iyanden lists when 10th edition comes out. But we'll be tweaking. They'll still be in the spirit of what the list is. So, you know, we might have some extra points to spend on them, or we might have less points, or different units will do different things. We'll just have to see what 10th edition brings. But that's what the list is for now. We'll do another one of these when 10th edition comes out as we tweak our lists and what we're thinking. But wish it luck on the channel. We'll see how it does in its first game very soon.